Okay, so have you ever felt like you're just bombarded with all this health advice? Like you're trying to figure out what's actually good for you, but it's just too much to keep up with.
I know exactly what you mean. There's always some new diet or trend popping up, and it's hard to sort through it all.
Well, that's what we're here for. Today, we're diving into a topic that you've probably seen everywhere, intermittent fasting.
Yeah, intermittent fasting is super popular right now. Lots of people are curious about it.
And what sparked this deep dive was actually a question from one of our listeners. They got really interested in IF after watching a YouTube video, not just like some explainer video, but an actual experiment.
Oh, interesting. Like someone trying it out in real life.
Exactly. The person in the video was worried about their BMI. They'd kind of gone overboard on bubble tea for like a month, and it had bumped them into the moderate risk category.
Bubble tea, that's a tough one to resist.
I know, right? Anyway, they wanted to lose about 8 kilos to get back into the low risk zone. So they decided to try intermittent fasting, specifically the 168 method, for 2 months and documented the whole thing.
Makes sense. It's a really popular method.
And the great thing is they also talked to some experts like doctors and nutritionists along the way. So that's what we're going to unpack today. Did it actually work for them? And what can we learn from their experience?
Sounds like a fascinating case study. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the video starts with the host explaining their motivation. Like I said, a month of indulging in bubble tea 3 times a week had taken its toll.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
They were really intrigued by intermittent fasting as a potential solution because they dabbled with it before and felt like they had more energy and didn't gain weight as easily.
That makes sense. It's often those personal observations that spark our curiosity to investigate further.
Totally. So in the video, they kind of go through all the different types of IF out
Mm.
there, like 168, 204, 1 meal a day, alternate day fasting, the 5.2 diet, the list goes on.
There really are a lot of variations, each with its own set of pros and cons.
Yeah, and it can get pretty confusing. But to really understand how fasting might lead to weight loss, they talked to Dr. Zokanyan Abdul Hamid, an emergency medicine doctor who also practices IF. He actually lost over 20 kilos himself using this method.
Wow, that's impressive. Having that personal experience alongside the medical expertise must be super valuable.
Absolutely. And he explains things in such a clear way. He uses this really cool analogy to describe how our bodies store and use energy. He compares it to a refrigerator.
Ooh, I like that. Or a refrigerator analogy that's relatable.
Right. So he says our liver is like the chiller where we store glycogen. Glycogen is basically the quick energy we get from carbs, like the stuff you grab for a quick snack from the fridge.
Got it. Glycogen for quick energy. What about our long-term energy
Well,
stores?
that's where the freezer comes in. Dr. Zukanyan says body fat is like the freezer. It's where we store energy long term. But it's a bit harder to access, like you have to defrost something from the freezer.
So our bodies use the glycogen from the chiller first and then move on to the freezer if needed.
Precisely. And here's the key point. The liver's glycogen storage is limited, but our capacity to store fat is, well, pretty much unlimited. So any extra energy we consume beyond what can be stored as glycogen ends up as fat.
That makes perfect sense. It explains why we gain weight when we eat more calories than we burn.
Exactly. Dr. Zukanyan said that it usually takes 12 to 24 hours of fasting to really start tapping into those fat reserves after the liver glycogen is used up.
So that's why those longer fasting windows are important if weight loss is the goal.
Right. Shorter fasts might not be enough to deplete the glycogen and force the body to turn to fat for fuel.
Interesting. So how did the video host apply this knowledge to their experiment?
So armed with this information, they decided to go with the 168 method. They figured they could either skip breakfast or just have an early dinner to fit within the 8-hour eating window.
Sounds like a pretty flexible approach.
Yeah, and they were super optimistic at first, but those first few weeks, they were definitely a struggle. Headaches, crankiness, missing breakfast, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, our bodies can be pretty resistant to change.
And after 2 weeks of sticking to it, they hadn't lost any weight. They were even feeling more tired than usual. Talk about discouraging, rather.
Absolutely. It's easy to lose motivation when you're not seeing immediate results.
So feeling a bit lost, they reached out to the IF community. They found this Facebook group with over 150,000 members dedicated to intermittent fasting and connected with Corey Cruz, who had lost a significant amount of weight, like 15 kilos through IF.
Wow, 15 kilos. That's a really inspiring success story.
Yeah, and Corey was super helpful. She reassured the host that those initial hunger pangs and tiredness were totally normal. Basically, the body's just used to being fed more frequently.
It's like weaning yourself off a habit.
Exactly. Her biggest tip, hydration. She emphasized drinking tons of water throughout the day.
It makes sense. Staying hydrated is crucial for overall health, but it can also help with those hunger signals.
And here's where Corey shared a really common mistake people make. When she first started EF, she didn't realize she was breaking her fast every morning with a caramel macchiato.
Oh, wow, that's easy to overlook.
Right. It seems like a harmless treat, but it was actually packing in 300 calories. So she stressed sticking to black coffee, unsweetened tea, or green tea during the fasting window.
Yeah, those sugary drinks can really sabotage your efforts without you even realizing it.
Totally. The video host was already a black coffee drinker, so they were good on that front. But they still weren't seeing any weight loss after a few weeks. So Corey took a look at their meals and noticed they weren't eating much protein and were still indulging in quite a few high-fat, high-calorie foods.
Ah, that's where the 80-20 rule comes in, right? It's
Okay,
not
right.
just about when you eat, but what you eat.
Exactly. Corey explained that protein helps you feel fuller for longer, which can help prevent overeating. And she wasn't saying to cut carbs completely. She actually recommended aiming for 80% healthy foods and allowing for 20% treats.
That sounds much more sustainable than some of those super strict diets out there.
Right. It's about finding that balance and making it a lifestyle change rather than a temporary fix.
So it's not a free pass to eat whatever you want during those eating hours.
Exactly. You still got to be mindful of your choices. So the video host took that advice on board and started incorporating more protein and making healthier choices overall.
Smart move. It's about making those gradual, sustainable changes.
To dig even deeper into the psychology of eating, the host talked to Dr. Mary Chong, a researcher who specializes in weight loss and eating behavior.
Yeah.
She had some really interesting tips about how to kind of trick your brain into making better choices.
Oh, I'm all ears for that. Sometimes we need a little extra help in that department.
One of her suggestions was to drink water or a clear soup before meals. It fills up your stomach and makes you feel less hungry, so you naturally eat less.
That's a simple but clever trick. It's like prepping your stomach for the meal ahead.
She also talked about using smaller plates. Apparently, when you see the same portion of food on a smaller plate, it looks bigger and tricks your brain into thinking you're eating more.
It's amazing how our visual perception can influence our eating habits.
Right. And then there's mindful eating, which is all about slowing down, paying attention to your food, and really tuning in to your body's fullness cues.
Yeah, mindful eating is so important. It takes about 20 minutes for your brain to register that you're full. So if you're scarfing down your food, you might end up overeating before your brain even catches up.
Definitely. But the video also got real about the potential risks of IF if it's taken too far. Dr. Chong warned against extreme calorie restriction or cutting out entire food groups.
Makes sense. It's about finding a healthy balance and not depriving your body of essential nutrients.
Exactly. She said that IF isn't for everyone either. Like pregnant women, people under 18, or people with a low BMI should definitely avoid it.
It's always important to consider individual circumstances and consult with a healthcare professional before making any drastic dietary changes.
Couldn't agree more. Now, the video host, being the curious type, also wanted to know about combining IF with other popular diets like keto, paleo vegan, and gluten-free. So they chatted with Assistant Professor Verena Tan, a dietitian who's really into personalized nutrition.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about people combining IF with other diets. It's definitely a trending topic.
Right. So with keto, the idea is that fasting might help you get into ketosis faster since you're already limiting carbs. But Professor Tan said there's not a lot of research to back that up, and it could actually lead to some pretty nasty side effects, like bad breath digestive issues, muscle cramps, and headaches.
So not exactly a winning combination.
Not really. And when it came to paleo, Professor Tan was concerned about the potential for lower bone density because you're cutting out dairy, which is a major source of calcium.
Yeah, that makes sense. Excluding entire food groups can be risky if you're not careful about getting those nutrients from other sources.
With the vegan diet, she recognized the ethical aspects and potential health benefits, but pointed out that it can be unhealthy depending on your food choices. If you're loading up on processed vegan junk food and sugary drinks. And she also stressed the importance of planning your meals carefully to avoid nutrient deficiencies.
It's a reminder that any diet, vegan or not, requires a balanced approach and thoughtful planning.
And as for gluten-free, she clarified that it's really only necessary for people with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. There's no evidence that it's beneficial for people without those conditions.
So it's important to be clear about the medical reasons for a diet versus following a trend without any underlying need.
Exactly. Professor Tan's overall advice was less is more. Less calories, less processed food and less time spent eating. She basically said that just slapping a trendy diet onto IF doesn't automatically make it healthier or more effective.
It all boils down to the fundamentals, making smart choices about what you eat.
So after 2 months of experimenting with IF and all this expert advice, what happened? Well, the video host lost 3 kilos.
Wow, that's awesome.
Right. And not only that, but their waist circumference went down from 92 to 86 centimeters. Their body fat percentage dropped from 24.1% to 18%. And even their visceral fat, the dangerous fat around your organs, decreased from 9 to 8.
That's amazing. It sounds like they saw some serious improvements in their overall health.
They did. Their doctor even said they significantly reduced their risk of cardiovascular disease. The host did admit to sometimes overindulging in unhealthy foods during their eating window.
Makes sense. It can be tempting to reward yourself after a fast, but it's important to be mindful of those choices.
Totally.
Hmm.
But overall, they were super happy with the results. Their conclusion: intermittent fasting worked for them, but it took discipline and being conscious about their food choices, not just when they ate, but what they ate.
That's such a valuable takeaway. It's not just about skipping meals, it's about making healthy choices during those eating windows.
So for our listeners, here's what we can learn from this experiment. IF can be a really effective tool, but it's not magic. You got to understand how your body uses energy, pay attention to the quality of your food, and avoid extremes.
It's about finding a sustainable approach that works for you and your lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that note, here's a little something to think about. We've heard a lot of different perspectives on IF, and everyone's body is different. So what's one small, sustainable step you can take to understand your own body's relationship with food and energy? It doesn't have to be anything drastic, just something small that feels right for you. Until next time.
Thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone.